I will tell them, go watch Medea so you can understand why I said what I said. Because to me, that is culture. That's the culture. That's who we are. And there's nothing wrong with who we are. And I've spent years thinking something was wrong with that, right? I spent years trying to be something so that I could be accepted by people. And actually, it didn't work. When I was being underwritten by many banks in the DMV, I would get feedback like, Gina, yes, you're a talented person, but we typically underwrite institutional developers, right? And they would name, and I would say, well, you know what? I actually have more experience than the principals at those institutions. When you provide communities with basically quality, affordable housing, they will take care of it. They absolutely take ownership of it, right? It's, if you look at, or what people think about these communities is really based on the large disinvestment that's happened, right, over 100, 200, let's go back 400 years, right? We have never been invested in, and neither have our communities. And when we do, right, we can make a humongous impact. We can change the trajectory of people's lives for generations if we invest in buildings and in people.
This is the Commercial Builders Network, where trust is restored, power is reclaimed, and legacy is built. Let's get to work. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of the Commercial Builders Network. My name is Tanisha Reed, and I'm your host. Today, we have the amazing Dr. Gina Merritt. She is the founder of Project Community Capital and Northern Real Estate Urban Ventures. Stay tuned. She's going to drop some nuggets for you. Well, hello, Dr. Merritt. How are you?
I am blessed and highly favored. How are you today?
I'm awesome. Blessed. I'm highly favored too. I like to think so. I like to think so. No, favor come upon me.
That's right.
Well, can you introduce yourself to the people and what are you known for?
So I am Dr. Gina Merritt, principal of Northern Real Estate Urban Ventures and founder of Project Community Capital and also WFL Collective. And I think I am known for, one, innovation, and two, I think my financing skills. I happen to be really good at structuring financing for affordable housing projects.
Awesome. So with all of your decades of experience, you've been in the industry for how long?
Child, do I really have to say?
Okay.
I have been in the industry for 30 years this year.
Yes, that is beautiful.
Thank you.
You are a vet.
Yes.
All right. So you are getting gems from somebody who actually has done this, not one of those fake coaches online that it is just everybody got to make it how they can.
I'm like an OG, as they say.
OG, yes, the real experience. So we're gonna get some firsthand gems. What first drew you to this industry, the commercial industry?
What's interesting is how I sort of I believe that's divine, how I fell into the industry. Because I went to college for MIS. I worked on Wall Street. I wound up in business school. And then I got a job in real estate through business school. But the sort of missing link when I came to the understanding really that this was what I was supposed to be doing is when I drove up to my job site for the first day at work and I saw a bulldozer. It made me cry. And you ask why? I was in the car crying and trembling because from the time I was 7 to the time I was 15 years old, I would have a recurring nightmare a few times a week of this bulldozer chasing me. Sometimes it would scoop me up. Sometimes it wouldn't. But I would wake up every night really in tears about this sort of nightmare. And then, I had this essentially circuitous route to real estate until that first day of my job when that bulldozer was on the site. It was 12 acres of dirt and a bulldozer. And then I realized, wow, this is what I was supposed to be doing. And I started out really wanting to be a psychologist, right? And then a computer programmer, which I actually did, which also, again, led to Wall Street. But then eventually I wound up with this real estate job. So I look at that as really being divine.
With your experience with traditional financing, what made you want to help and start to serve the underserved community?
That's a great question. I think I think, my background is I grew up in affordable housing also. And actually, I didn't realize I grew up in affordable housing until I was in my 20s, right? Which is a kind of weird thing, but I had no idea that the property I lived in was based on income. And then
Mm.
when I get to my interview for this job, right? And what's interesting there is that the job posting was for a construction manager for a construction company. And when I spoke to the principals, they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's actually a development manager for a development company, but different job."
Mm-hmm.
And then they told me what it is they did, which was affordable housing. And this is why I say it was divine, right? Because I thought I was going for one job and it turned out to be another job. And when the principal told me what the job was, I became passionate. I was like, wow, yes, if I could build buildings like in the community I grew up, it would make me happy. I would be excited about waking up every day and doing that job. So then I was offered the job. And again, then I realized, like I said, through that, site visit, that really, that was all meant to be. And luck, divinity, all the things came together at once. And I started my career in 1995 building 288 units in Virginia.
Wow.
Hmm.
You started your career.
Yes. Isn't that crazy? It is
That
crazy because it's not typical. And what's interesting is when new and young developers, start in the space, you'll see a lot of folks starting with like, first single family home flips, then 4 units, then
Mm-hmm.
8 units, then 15 units. And I
Yeah.
started my career building, very large scale projects. So yeah, it is funny, right? That I started my
Right.
career doing 288 units.
Yeah, that's how you know it's divine for
Right.
sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. Can you go dive in? I want to dial back a little bit and
Sure.
actually talk about the companies that you founded and stuff. So just give a background of who exactly we are talking to
Okay.
and what did you have your hands in?
Sure. So Northern Real Estate Urban Ventures has been in existence for about 25 years, and we spent 20 years actually building other people's buildings. So we would build projects for nonprofits, for large multi-billion dollar development companies, for private landowners who had, say, access to capital, but did not have the technical expertise to execute real estate development, affordable housing projects. So we did that for 20 years, and then after George Floyd was murdered, we we were really sort of chased by lenders and investors because they were looking for people to invest in that look like me, black and female. And there are very few of us at this level who have built, you know, a few thousand units, underwritten $5 billion worth of transactions. And so I wound up with a lot of investment in 2020 for projects in which I became an owner. So in 2020, say 2020 to 2022, I started getting new projects under my belt that I was building for myself, right? Versus building for others.
I
And
love
then
that.
about a decade ago or a little more, I founded Project Community Capital because I was working on a project for an owner, right? I was building their project, and I did not want to have the same experience I had had for, the prior 15 years, which
Mm-hmm.
was building projects where developers and contractors would try to hire people from the community, and those people would last 1 to 2 days or 2 to 3 weeks in their jobs. And, if that happens during construction, the general contractor usually doesn't rehire anyone,
Not at
right?
all.
They can check the
Mm-hmm.
box and say, I hired because they did, but that person
Mm-hmm.
didn't last. And I knew from all of my work in the community, I would meet people all the time that were bright and that were capable. So I was like, why can't these guys do it? And then
Right.
I created this intervention. I learned it was an intervention when I went to my doctoral program, but I basically created this platform by which I would pre-screen and vet people up front and then send the people that I knew were ready to work to a general contractor for a job. And once I did that, I wound up with 94, 98% retention rates. So we would hire people from public housing and from the community, and they would last the whole construction timeline, right? So if it was 12 months, 18 months, 15 months, the subcontractor was on board with the project. Whoever they hired stayed the whole time. No one could believe it, right? That we had these very high
Yeah.
retention rates. That was Project Community Capital. Then I went to my doctoral program in 2019, wound up being all virtual, right, due to COVID, et
COVID.
cetera. And I redesigned Project Community Capital to sort of break off a piece of it, which is case management, essentially. It is, if you're ready to work, PCC places you into employment. If you're not ready to work, the nonprofit I founded, WFL Collective, basically helps you with supportive services, education, and training to prepare you to be placed into employment. So now we do not only construction job placement, but we do permanent placement. And essentially we have this whole collection of companies that I run. And the basis for that is really to help the community, to help people who are underestimated gain employment and be able to live in dignity and take care of themselves and their families.
That's beautiful. I mean, absolutely beautiful. It's
Thank
so
you.
aligned with even with this podcast. Or what I'm looking to do with this is I did have a little hand where I was in real estate. I have my real estate license on the residential
Oh,
side.
wow. Nice.
And I did nothing with it. Okay. I made no
Maybe
money.
we need to talk about that.
Yes, ma'am. But I always say when I'm going to these underdeveloped communities, if you help them to give them the skills to actually build their community, they will upkeep it. If they say, no, I painted that wall. No, I built that
That's the
wall.
truth.
They will keep it up. So I even put that to my councilwoman up here in the Upper Marlboro area. Like they're trying to redo the Capitol Heights area. And I was like, how about, they were like, well, if you redo, what is it? Not Addison Road. What is that? Marlboro Pike they're working on. If we redo it, I'm at a town hall meeting, how they're not going to mess it up? I was like, well, give them a skill, give them a trade. And she was like, well, come up with it. And I was like, oh,
No,
I
the,
don't
the
know if I'm the
truth
person.
is, let me tell you something. The truth about these communities are that there are brilliant people there, like there are brilliant people everywhere, right? It is about their lack of access, right, to all of the quality things in life that communities that are invested in get, right? And the other thing to your point is when you provide communities with basically quality, affordable housing, they will take care of it. They absolutely take ownership of it, right? It's if you look at or what people think about these communities is really based on the large disinvestment that's happened right over 100, 200, let's go back 400 years, right? We have never been invested in, and neither have our communities. And when we do, right, we can make a humongous impact. We can change the trajectory of people's lives for generations if we invest in buildings and in people. And a project I did a few years ago, what's interesting is that there were public housing residents living in this building and working class people living in this building. And the people actually who took care of the building the most, who were like, cleaning up after other people's kids, who were actually paying their rent on time, they were the public housing residents,
Wow.
right? Because those folks, unfortunately, in lots of communities, there's not enough investment or reinvestment in public housing, right? That money comes from the federal government, and lots of times there's just not enough resources to do that. And that's why a lot of public housing authorities now are privatizing them, right, to help sort of with that maintenance and upkeep. But when those folks get a shot at a new, beautiful place to live, let me tell you something. To your point, people will take care of their homes.
Yes, that's awesome. So what is it? Because we have the narrative that we don't show up on time. Now I'm not saying that is always wrong. All right, we don't show up on time. We don't. We come in. We want to play. We don't want to. We want to do it for a higher price, but don't want to get the work done in a timely manner. How are you? Because it seems like you're combating that narrative. What is it that you're teaching in these seminars or do your program that allows them to get these skills to get them ready for the industry?
Oh, that's an amazing question. So what's interesting in our work, right, is that we go into communities and we go door to door, right, to people's apartments. We go to supermarkets and
Wow.
barbershops, And what we find is there's a whole bunch of people. Actually, we have raw data to tell the story, which is about 30% of the people we screen are ready to work. 70% are not. And they're not for a multitude of reasons, most being mental and physical health care. Like most being that there's something physically wrong, and that's why they can't keep their employment, right? That's why they show up late and all the things. Or there's something mentally wrong because they've been traumatized, maybe from trauma in their home, trauma in their schools, trauma in their communities. And so that's why it's important for WFL Collective as the nonprofit case management to work with people to help them pass these obstacles, right? Again, so that they can be ready to work. Because the other interesting part is that employers will hire people that aren't very skilled if they have what we call RTA, if they're reliable, trustworthy, and ambitious. Because if you have those skills, and employers actually, certainly at an entry level position, which is what we do most of our placement in, they will train you in the technical skills you need to do the job, right? They are just looking for somebody with that criteria. And the challenge is, you know, our communities suffer from generations of trauma, and we don't get the mental health care we need. PCC in itself has saved multiple people who were having suicidal ideations by connecting them with mental health care. We have a mental health suite in one of our properties. We will go to another community, people who need health care from that community, mental health, bring them to our mental health care suite, and then actually place them into employment. We've done that many times over. So, you know, so the truth is people are completely capable of working and doing well in their jobs. If you build trust with that community, you can get them to their services and then get them employed. So it's really a very comprehensive, right, holistic approach. But when you approach the work that way, you will see the impact, and then you'll understand, like, folks in these communities are just like anyone else.
Absolutely. So when did you realize, and I know you said you didn't realize you were in public housing until you were in your 20s, right? But when did you realize that access was a bigger barrier than ambition in our community?
I think it was that first project where we implemented Project Community Capital. I think that it was coming to light when I was doing my development planning for that project, right? I was working with the community because we were building a building and trying to get their input on the design. And I would just go door to door to door, right? I meet a whole bunch of people, just amazing human beings. You know, they were, you could tell they were diligent, they were persistent, they were committed, right? They had all of these values, but many of them were unemployed. So I just started thinking to myself, and based on my experience, right, for the prior decade, where people were just falling out of jobs all of the time on the projects I was working on. So it sort of came all together on this one project. And I thought that project had goals, socioeconomic goals set. And I said to myself, I got to do something different. That project, I happened to have control of the whole thing, or I was doing all of the work, soup to nuts. So I really had the opportunity to influence how employment happened on the project. And so it sort of all came together then, because I was like, it's really not about ambition, right? It's not about folks being reliable. It's about access, right? It's about it's a two-part problem, actually. It is about the access for the person, but it's also the general contractor who's not really good at vetting people from the community to be on projects. That's just the truth. They are really focused on building the building. They also appreciate and respect the whole process of hiring people from the community. But the truth is, they're not very good at sussing out who's going to be successful in the project and not. And the piece that we bring to it really is our ability to build trust. And when we
That was my
do,
next question.
yeah. So when we do build trust, the interesting thing, and then I'll shut up and let you ask your question. But when you wind up building that trust with people in the community, what you find is that they'll share things with you about themselves that they don't share with employers, and those things prevent them actually from working. So when somebody tells you that they're depressed, or they tell you about the person that died in their family, or they tell you they've had a headache once a week for the last 5 weeks, probably because they have hypertension undiagnosed and they need medication. So when you build that bond, people tell you these things, and then you can actually get them the help they need so they can get a job and keep a job. And it really is working at a grassroots level, meeting people where they are to understand who they are as humans, that allows us to do the work the way we do it.
That was powerful.
Thank you.
Because I felt like the spirit checked me for a second, because I've been saying, now granted, there are people who don't choose not to show up, right?
Yes.
But
yeah,
understanding the story behind the why are they coming late? Why are they able to show up? Understanding that there may be a story behind that may be preventing them. I
Absolutely.
received that. I
Beautiful.
received that. Because I always think, I was like, well, that's an excuse, because I tried to always show up and I would like show up early. So it's like, well, but I'm not in the same predicament. Everybody's story is different.
That's the point. That's the point.
You know? So, I received that. That was good. How do you, and you kind of touched on it, but how did you start, like, walking into the community? A lot of these people, might be looking at you crazy, like, you don't know nothing about this struggle. Like, what are you doing here? How do you,
Beautiful
on both
question.
sides,
Beautiful
trust
question.
in the community
Beautiful
and trust
question.
with the contractors?
Beautiful question. Beautiful question. So what I'm doing every day in this work is bridging social capital, right? And bridging social capital is about the trusted relationship. And to your point, it goes both ways. And so the people that I meet in the community, they learn to trust me because I start by being transparent about my life, right? About the fact that my mother died when I was 13 years old. My father was an alcoholic, and I had to raise 3 siblings. And so when I tell them about the struggles of my life and what I've achieved, they do learn to respect me, right? Part of it is that when I show up, usually, I might appear to be the Black girl with the silver spoon in her mouth, but that is completely not the case, right?
Yeah.
So I tell people about, my story, and then they learn to trust me. The second thing I do, though, in the community is I'm always doing workshops on development and educating the community, because I promise you, if you give your community the information, they will always make the right choice for their community. It's happened to me too many times. I had one project, then I'll talk about the trust with the GCs, had a project in Capitol Heights where we worked with the community, did a survey, but before that, we did a whole bunch of educational workshops on the development, workshops on sort of statistical data, like that community was at the time had the highest foreclosure rate in the whole state of Maryland, because some people wanted single family homes. So we were trying to demonstrate why we weren't building them. We gave them all the information. Then we had 2 options for the project, a lower density and a higher density one. And we explained to the community, if you want quality retail, you need to have more people, right? Explain why, if you have more people, especially people with higher incomes, how that attracts retailers. We then did a survey to that whole community, and this was a Black community, and this Black community picked the higher density project. What? No one believes that, but it's the truth, because we armed the community with the education, and they made the appropriate choice for themselves. They knew what they wanted in their community, and with all the data, they made the best choice. And then so for general contractors, right? General contractors, it is that I have those relationships as a developer, and I have relationships with the top of the food chain at the contractor, right? So the contractors that I work with, I have great relationships with the presidents of the organizations, the COOs, the project executives. And when you build those relationships with the general contractor and also say, if you hire these folks who we are telling you are qualified and you have any challenges, you can call us, email us, text us, and we'll make sure that we take care of that person, that we help to resolve any issues. That also helps build trust with them. So we've had, multiple general contractors work with us and PCC, and they have always been happy with the outcome. They get to meet their socioeconomic goals, right? They get to authentically and truly meet them, right? They're not checking the box. The person lasted 2 or 3 weeks. They're checking the box, and that person's there 12 months, 15 months. So now it's really authentic. And these general contractors, like I said, they really do want to do this, right? It's hard for them to do, but with PCC, it gets done in a way that preserves their reputation, and it also preserves their bottom line because, in some instances, some municipalities actually have fines, right, if you don't meet the goals. So working with PCC ensures that you don't get fined, that you meet the goals, and that you can be proud that the building that you're building is actually truly impacting economically the people that live there.
Awesome. Wow. That's my doctor in front of your name now.
All right now.
You gets it done. Okay. So you've been both in like institutional spaces like Morgan Stanley, and now you're in the grassroots kind of arena. What's the difference between the two, and how do they both serve the community well?
Oh, that's interesting. So, yeah, I worked for Morgan Stanley. I, in fact, actually also worked for Goldman Sachs at one point. Goldman Sachs actually is an investor in one of our projects in DC that we just completed in January. And what's interesting is that those organizations, right, like the Goldman Sachs's and the Morgan Stanleys of the world, I think they have realized, really, of course, since the murder of George Floyd, how important it is to embrace all communities. And they they are still very supportive in terms of affordable housing and developers of color. And I think the way they have supported us, really, I mean, DEI is a dirty word now, but in my experience, the way they've supported communities is through supporting people like me, right? People like me who have lacked access to capital to do our projects, but have 30 years of experience, right? And those investment banks, right, being known as institutions, it's very interesting how institutions then evaluate projects or investments in communities, right? Because there is this notion that there's a certain bar, right, for those kinds of institutions. And in real estate, you'll hear institutional used a lot of times, right? Like when I was being underwritten by many banks in the DMV, I would get feedback like, Gina, yes, you're a talented person, but we typically underwrite institutional developers, right? And they would name them. And I would say, well, you know what? I actually have more experience than the principals at those institutions. So part of this whole notion about how institutions like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs um, um, relate to communities who are not seen as, say, investment grade or institutional grade, say, projects in those communities, is that it is about thinking beyond, right, the box that you're used to, right? It comes down to being innovative, being forward thinking, thinking for the long term about how the dollars that these institutions generate, right, and where they generate them from, impact the communities in which people live. So just think about all these institutions and where all their money comes from in terms of corporations. Who works for them, right? Even people in the communities we serve, we're saying they're underserved, but still a lot of those folks have working class jobs in places that are owned by institutions. So they're really not that far apart if we think about it. And I spend most of my time trying to make that bridge. Like I said, bridging the institutions to the community, right?
Yeah.
They have a lot in common in the end, right? I mean, all of us want economic empowerment, and there's a way to make those connections and make them meaningful. But it is a lot of hard work, right? It takes a lot of time and effort um, to do that bridging. But certainly, that's my whole career really has been based on that.
Awesome. Awesome. How does social capital, when it comes to relationships, access, and trust, how does that impact hiring, funding, and building these projects? And how do you go about building your social capital?
Yeah, social capital is a really big deal. And what's also interesting is that I don't think in my youth I spent a lot of time, or I didn't spend enough time developing that social capital.
Yeah.
And I think, partly between my business school experience and my doctoral experience, I realized how powerful networks were. And so during my doctoral program, I sort of leaned into this notion of social capital and bridging it, and the fact that I had made it so far in life and I knew so many people in high places. I'm like, right, because I'm a developer and I'm in control of these projects, I really do have economic power in my hands. I'm the one
Mm-hmm.
giving out the contracts to the general contractors, to the architects, right? So I said to myself, well, why can't I just use my relationships to help folks in the community? If you think about it, right, people like you and me, when we want something or when we need a job, right, we have friends we can call. We have
Mm-hmm.
friends that we can call and say, oh, so and so that works at this company, right? Because you might be a seasoned executive, you're somebody in a senior position in a company. And most of the communities we serve don't have access to those kind of people, right? When they send their resume in, they go in a basket with everybody else's resume.
Yeah.
And if you think about how this country was built, it was completely built on relationships, right? It was
Yeah.
completely built on people hooking other people up, right? Whether they deserved it or not. And so my whole
Mm-hmm.
point is I'm in these communities finding talented people, and my goal is to hook them up. So in fact, we have an app called Employment Plug, and basically, right, we're the plug, right? So our
Yeah.
job is to hook you up. Our job is to hook you up with a job.
Yeah.
That's really what we do. So we use these relationships and we bring them to the community in order to help build trust. Now we have people in communities where we've placed them into employment that can also be our bridge to social capital, right? They can speak to the work that PCC does and WFL Collective does. And when people, real life people on the ground in these communities, speak about what our work, again, that is also social capital, right? And it
Yeah,
also
absolutely.
supports building trust. Now, when you talk about funding, that's an interesting narrative. And I spend a lot of time leveraging my social capital to get funding for my projects, right? It's a very small world in terms of CDFIs, which is really where I get most of my money from, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm still in a place where, although I have more experience than many principals at institutional developers, um, I still don't have access to the same kind of capital that they do. Um, but I basically, work my own network when I'm trying to find funding. And I would say for developers who are interested in doing work in these communities and are looking for funding, that they should really start with CDFIs. Like CDFIs, right? Community Development Financial Institutions, they really are the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they're looking for is obviously, like any other financial institution, they're looking for a good investment. But what they really are investing in is you as a person.
Mm-hmm.
So they are very much interested in building a relationship of trust with you as a developer. But the other piece that has to be there is your technical skills, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
very important. There are a lot of folks out there that want to do real estate development, and they will have trouble with funding. And a big piece of that is really about technical skill set. It is about understanding the numbers and understanding them at a granular level, being able to have a conversation about debt service coverage ratio, being able to understand what's the difference between the 82-cent credit pricing and 89 cents and what it does to your budget, understanding if you don't have enough contingency in your project, what is the backstop to that. All of the technical pieces that you need to understand about affordable housing and finance are critical, right, to be able to obtain funding. So you can have social capital all day, right? If you don't have the skills, certainly the technical skills, the financial skills, you know, the social capital won't matter. So social capital is important, but you really have to have the requisite skill set in order to actually leverage it, right? And unfortunately, we've seen before where people have access to social capital, and they don't have the skill set, right? We've seen that. Right? We've seen that, right?
Yeah.
People get jobs and they're not so great at it. But I think it's important, especially for our communities, to understand that we have to have the skill set in order to leverage social capital and in order to get the funding that we need to do the work that we're interested in doing in underserved communities.
Awesome. So you kind of tapped into it a little bit already, but where should they go to get these technical skills for a new developer or somebody that's interested in becoming one?
I would say there's a bunch of programs in the DMV. One of them is a Capital Impacts. They have a program. It used to be called the Equitable Developer Initiative. I'm not sure if it still has that same name, but Capital Impact, their program was an amazing program that helped sort of give new developers education, training, and access to capital. So there are still programs like that are out there. I would say the most critical part, even before you get to them, because one of the things they rank you on is your technical skill set, right? Your ability to use Excel and run a financial model, understand budgeting, understand how to calculate a mortgage. So there's like some very basic skills, again, that you need to have in order to even be part of some of these cohorts of programs. So I would say to new developers, the most important thing you can do is to get to take a class on finance, right? Whether that is at the local community college level, whether that is like ULI. I think ULI has a pro forma modeling class, but financial modeling is like one of the most critical skill sets for developers. And so every time I talk to people, speaking engagements or podcasts, that's the one thing I harp on. Like, go get some financial modeling classes and learn how to do a pro forma. It will change everything for you.
Awesome. Now, for the new developer who may feel invisible in the system, what advice do you give to them?
Well, a lot of it is about being persistent, right? Being diligent, being tenacious. I would say also participating in a lot of these, what do you call them? These uh, real estate programs, like BizNow, for example, BizNow is a fabulous place to go to hear about development projects, and to meet people in real estate of all disciplines, right? It is about networking, again, building that social capital and networking to have people see you and see your work. I think the other thing is that I try to tell new developers, you may have to work for someone else first, right? A lot of folks jump out from one discipline and try to be a developer, and it is a very hard business. So why not work for somebody else first at a junior level? You're not going to make as much money, but you're going to get a crazy amount of skills. And then you have access to that company's network, right? Then you can sort of make a little bit of a name for yourself before you jump out. I mean, when I went out on my own, I was able to leverage, honestly, I was able to leverage the company that I worked for when I was moving forward, trying to do my own work. The fact that I could say I worked for Clark, it was called Clark Realty Capital. It's called CRC Partners or something like that now. but that brought me a lot of cachet, right? When I was a developer trying to do my own thing, and I could go back and point to my history and say, yes, I used to work for Clark Realty Capital, and everybody knew who that was. Then people were willing to give me a look. People were willing to give me a shot, right? Because I actually had formal training from a brand name that they knew. So I would say all three of those things. Try to work for somebody else, yeah, somebody who's known in the industry. Try to work for a small developer, for a lot less money, again, to get yourself some skills, and then also try to get some technical training for pro forma modeling, because all of those things are going to help you elevate your game, and then people will really be interested in working with you.
Awesome, awesome. So you've led projects that have been from the government side, private industry, your community projects. What's the difference, by the way, that you show up to the table? Is there a different process? Like, how do you show up?
In terms of, in the different spaces?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Oh, so that's interesting. So I think that these days, anyway, I think I show up the same way all the time. There's this whole notion of what's the term called? Not imposter syndrome. What's the word for it? When you talk differently in different spaces.
Code switching.
Code switching. Yeah, I would say that for a while I absolutely did have to do that, and I felt like I could not be myself in all the spaces. And honestly, since 2020, I think I have embraced the fact that this is Gina all the way around. I am who I am. And so I am who I am in all spaces. And I think also it's become so important for me for people to understand in corporate and in government my culture, and that means that I should be able to bring my whole self to work, right? So I think people have gotten used to that. I can be in meetings now with government people and banks and, use language that I would not have used 10 years ago, right? And I think also that I've built up enough respect with these people that they accept me for who I am. Like sometimes I'll be in meetings and I'll say something like, good morning. and then people look at me, what did you say? And I'm like, if y'all don't know Tyler Perry, y'all got a problem, right? So it doesn't matter who it is, I will tell them, go watch Medea so you can understand why I said what I said. Because to me, that is culture. That's the culture. That's who we are. And there's nothing wrong with who we are. And, I've spent years thinking something was wrong with that, right? I spent years trying to be something so that I could be accepted by people. And actually, it didn't work. When I come to think about it, I mean, acting like I'm, from somewhere else versus where I'm from didn't really buy me anything. Right. So, there's a difference between, understanding and being able to be grammatically correct and speak English, right? I mean, that's one thing. But then again, being who I am and my authentic self in terms of how I speak to people, right? Like good morning. That I love saying that. I love using that. It gets me fired up. It like gets me set for the day when I say that. It makes me feel like, yeah, Gina, you're here to do the job. That's why I use it, right? And so I shouldn't be afraid to be me. So
So would you have changed that from the beginning, or do you think it's important to come in a certain way just to get in the door, or should you just be authentic?
That's a good point. That's a good point to get in the door. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I think to get in the door, I am my educated self. And by that, I don't mean that I'm not speaking like me, because I speak like this all the time, right? For me, it's about using certain language that I otherwise would not use. So no, I probably do hold back the language until I get the trust of the person, until they can understand, I'm smart whether I say good morning or not.
Right.
But that's a good point. So because it's all about getting in the door, right? And if people perceive you a certain way, you can't get in the door, and that's reality. So as much as I just want to be Gina all the time, thank you for clarifying, I get in the door, I show this person I'm capable, and then I'm like, yeah, and I can say good morning all the time because I know what I'm doing.
I'm talking about, yes. And it's funny you said it because even with this platform, so I went to school. I went to Howard. Howard University. You know.
There it is.
And I went there and I had to take a communications. Well, my degree was in communication, so I had to take a speech class. So I naturally turn on. And it's like, well, how do I make sure that I be Tanisha always in the moment, relatable, because it comes out where but it's not like it's not me. It's just another part of me. But but I now don't do the, hey, how are you doing today? My name is Tisha.
Exactly.
Now that was
see that
and I was
part.
like, okay, dial it back a little bit, still be communicate and fluent with my words.
That's right.
And articulate, but still the energy
that's
of me.
my point. That's my point.
Yeah.
I just, it took so long to get here, and I think, the racial reckoning after George Floyd's murder, I think it made a lot of people think differently about how they show up. And but I would still agree that in order to get the door open, right, you don't have to be fake, but it's hard to be 100% of yourself still if you don't get the opportunity, right, if the door's not open. So you're right, you don't have to be all super proper, but you should be articulate. I know we hate to use that word, but I'm saying we got to use it to get the door open. And then when we get the door open, we can go, good morning. I mean, for real.
I love that. So what is your ask? What is the next level for you? Where do you see your business going? What is your ask from the community?
Well, from the community, I don't ask anything. I want them to show up how they show up. I want them to just answer the door when we knock. I want them to believe that we're the truth. I've had people say to me, it was hard to believe that we were the truth because they were so used to not getting the support they need and disappointment. And we've shown up in a way that people are so appreciative and happy about. So the community is doing what they're supposed to do. They're trying to survive. The ask I have for people that don't live in underserved communities is to donate to organizations like ours. It doesn't have to be ours, but it takes money to do this work. To tell you the truth, we've self-funded most of our work, right? Wow. We've changed people's lives for generations. I'll give you a quick story because this is really important. And we had a guy who we placed into employment, and the government was taking child support out of his paycheck already, but then swiped it out of his bank account, right? Because those systems don't talk to each other, right? So they swiped the money of his bank account, so he had no savings left. This is a guy who came home from prison. I mean, why wouldn't you go back and sell drugs again, right? I mean, why not if the system's not working for you? So we sent the $1,350 the government took, we sent it back to his father so it could go into his father's bank account so he could have the money. But we wrote the check to do that, right? Wow. So I'm saying, and now that person, they're still on the trajectory, right? They're still working, they're still doing well. But if we didn't have the $1,350 to give back to him, imagine what would have happened.
You go back to what you know.
Right. And he would have wound up in prison again. The government would have been paying his child support, and the government would have been paying to house him, right? Instead, if we could raise money, right, from people and continue to do this work and scale it, we can change the system. We can have people not go to jail, right? Not have the government spend that money in all the ways it does, like raising other people's children, right? People just need a shot. People just need access. So my ask to the larger community is to go to our websites, projectcommunitycapital.net or wflcollective.org, and donate to us today, because your donation can actually change someone's life forever.
Amen. Amen.
Thank
As
you.
usual, how else can they get in contact with you besides, or is the website the go-to?
The website
support you.
is best. I also have my website, drginamerritt.net, and you can send me messages through that website. They come right to my phone.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Thank you for your
This
interest.
is beautiful.
Thank you.